Hello, this is Dane Takahashi. I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat, and I'm here moderating the session on leveling up through customer engagement. And I'm here with Lisa Smano, Senior Vice President of Experience and Insights at Jam City, and Will Crocker, Vice President of Customer and Partner Marketing at Braze. And our session today is about gaming, and this industry saw double-digit growth in 2020 as many other industries shrank during the pandemic. And the game industry has stayed hot with lots of investor money coming into it and acquisitions taking out a lot of the smaller companies. But one way to replenish that base is to enable small companies to become bigger through customer engagement and acquisition. So I think many industries can learn from games when it comes to building engagement and community. And there's no game without community, of course. But first, let me have our panelists introduce more about themselves. So let's start with Lisa. Can you tell us more about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Spano, and as Dean mentioned, I oversee our experience team, our consumer insights team, and our UX research team at Jam City. I've been at Jam City for a little over 4 years now, and prior to Jam City, I oversaw the consumer insights team for our mobile titles at Electronic Arts.
Yeah, welcome. And Will.
Sure. I'm Will Crocker. Hey, I lead customer and partner marketing, as you said, at Braze. Braze, if you're not familiar, is a comprehensive customer engagement platform that helps brands really bridge the gap with their consumers and, really form relevant and memorable connections to them using a wide array of different messaging channels: email, push notifications, in-app messages, SMS, and more. I've been at Braze for the past 8 years or so, and previously to my role in marketing, I actually worked with a lot of our customers directly in some of the biggest brands in gaming to help them drive their own customer engagement strategies.
Okay, so let's start with Lisa on this one. Can you explain how thinking about community led to new innovations in the gaming space in the past year, I guess?
Sure. So we have two types of communities at Jam City. So one is traditional communities that our community managers run. So our own channels like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, etc. And we've also spent the past 4 years building up what we call our insider communities. So these are communities of highly engaged players, and they are overseen by our research team in partnership with our studio and marketing as well. So our insider communities consist of some of our most engaged players, and the role of this community really is to make sure we're continuing to innovate and to create engaging experiences for those players. One of the big innovations for us coming from community feedback was our Cookie Jam Wheel of Fortune event that we launched last year. So we learned through our insider communities that many of our players actually had a high affinity for Wheel of Fortune. So a lot of what we like to learn from these players is kind of, outside of games, what are other experiences and interests and hobbies that these players might have. So we were able to leverage this information to create a 360-degree brand marketing campaign. And that included both an in-game event that was a limited time event. So the way the event worked was it was based off of first try wins. So as a player, once you finished a level on your first try, you uncovered a letter in a Wheel of Fortune branded puzzle in the game. And the more levels that you played, or the more levels that you won on your first try, the more letters you revealed until the word puzzle was completed. And this was a sweepstakes event, so it was really exciting for a lot of our players. And once you finished one of the Wheel of Fortune puzzles in the game, you earned tickets, virtual tickets that went towards the possibility of winning $15,000. And then we also rewarded our players once they completed a Wheel of Fortune branded puzzle in the game, some unlimited lives as well. And then the other thing that happened on the marketing side was the Wheel of Fortune set was branded Cookie Jam for an entire week. And then the Wheel of Fortune company promoted the Cookie Jam game through their social channels as well. And what we noticed was there was a large increase in organic installs for this game. And with our current players, they were just so excited to see something innovative and unique in the Cookie Jam game. So we talked to players after the event to get their feedback. Feedback was very positive. So we are continuing to explore more opportunities like this in Cookie Jam and in some of our other titles as well.
Mm-hmm. And Will, how about you? You got some thoughts on community here? And
yeah, absolutely. I think community was obviously a huge focus for gaming in 2020 with COVID-19, the pandemic. I think it was harder than ever for players to kind of connect with their friends in the real world. And so I think for so many individuals out there, gaming became a crucial way where they could maintain those strands of friendship and, you know, kind of keep their relationships going forward. There's something to do with your friends that was obviously safe and easy. So I think that's a lot of the reasons, you know, even outside of mobile gaming, you're seeing, and with mobile gaming as well, you're seeing explosions in a lot of pieces of community software around the gaming industry. You know, things like Discord and game stream platforms are having record years right now. And I also think what Lisa said about, you know, insider communities is really interesting. You know, you're seeing these kind of communities bubble up for games of every size and shape, from mobile game communities to, you know, huge AAA, you know.
Well, it looks like we lost your audio there.
Oh, no.
Apologies. Sorry about that. I must have hit the wrong button. I'll restart what I said then. What I was going to say is, you know, what Lisa said about insider communities is also really interesting. You're starting to see these bubble up for games of every size and shape, from mobile game communities to AAA publishers. And you're there. These are kind of companies out there, I think, more than ever, that are looking to listen to their consumers as they craft the next big hit. We even see, you know, at Braze, our customers are constantly incenting to consumers to join these communities and ferreting out who are the next actual kind of insiders, if you will, via things like their normal customer engagement strategy, looking to look at the biggest customers they have, the ones that are kind of whale customers and ones that could potentially become whales, and thinking about how they can really use those customers' feedback is important to them more than ever.
We forgot to tell Will not to play games while he's talking.
Hopefully we can edit that one out.
So Lisa, for the next one too, how does personalization tie into engagement?
Yeah, so great question, Gene. I think that we're very fortunate being in games, being able to personalize the experience. It's one of the only mediums where it's possible. So if you think about a TV show, you're passive, right? You're just watching what's happening in the television show. If you're reading a book, you're passive. So for games where we have the opportunity to create as much personalization as possible, it's extremely important for engagement. A couple of items here that I can talk about. One is for our Harry Potter game. We have an amazing avatar creator that we spent a lot of time building up and getting feedback from players, making sure that it was the ideal avatar that they were able to create. So when you come into this game, we knew that these Harry Potter players, for them, this is a very immersive game for them. So they wanted to feel like they personally were part of the Hogwarts experience. So one of the first things that the players do when they come in to Hogwarts Mystery is to create an avatar that really is personalized for them. And so we spent a lot of time making sure that players were able to create the avatar that could really look like them. So a lot of time invested went into, you know, players have the option of selecting their gender. Lots of skin tone colors was very important to us. Different hairstyles are offered to players, not just hairstyles, but hair texture as well was something we learned was very important to players. A variety of different facial features and clothing as well. And this feature has been extremely successful. We've received a number of letters from our fans thanking us for creating a system like this. For a lot of the players, it was the first time that they were really able to create an avatar that looked just like them. So it's something that we're very proud of at Jam City. And then the second example I have is we do a lot in terms of player journey and journey mapping. So a lot of times when players enter the game, we will give them a starter bundle that's deeply discounted. And as we start to learn more about players and their behavior, those offers are customized to what we know those players care most about. So for example, we might know that some players love certain boosters, whereas other players never use them. So we're able to leverage this data and create offers based off of what our players care most about. And then that behavioral data, we continue to optimize it over and over until, so that journey is always being customized and personalized to what players care most about.
I remembered my kid playing this and spending an awful lot of time in the personalization area. And it sort of helps me understand, like, why it takes so long to make some of these games.
It does. I think the personalization is so important. And we spent a ton of time testing in beta, the avatar creator in particular, just making sure that players were excited by what we were able to offer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Will, did you have a comment on personalization and engagement?
Absolutely, yeah. Personalization and engagement is more crucial now than ever. I mean, I think for this gaming panel, I chose this background, which I think for so many people out there is probably instantly brings back memories of like plugging in their NES for the first time and playing the first level of Super Mario Brothers. But to so many young consumers out there, it means absolutely nothing. And I think those sort of opportunities for resonance are something that brands have to really be thinking about, not only just with young and old, but every sort of demographic split you can possibly think of. Customer engagement really boils down to knowing your consumer and being respectful of where they're coming from, whether that's in regard to their behavior in the application or in the game, their location, or just macro situation in the world. I think, a basic example of this might be treating players differently who have made a purchase in the past for those who haven't. That single variable unto itself, I think kind of gets at that what you were just saying about how difficult spinning out this web of possibilities is, because that should affect things like, whether or not using push versus in-app versus email versus, in-app pop-ups versus stashing in an inbox, as well as like the cadence and the promotions you offer that player. There's a lot of different things that just even that affects. If you have a customer in your game playing, game, and maybe they're very loyal, they're spending already, tens or hundreds of dollars on in-app purchases, do you really need to be intruding on that individual's experience with like full screen interstitials, especially if you're, advertising something they've already purchased in the past? These kind of faux pas can really derail customer engagement really quickly and make the game feel, less resonant, less personalized, less like something they want to get to. I think what Lisa said about testing is also really important. Your whole strategy with regard to customer engagement has to be something you rigorously test and retest on a continuing basis. One of our clients at Braze, Colibri Games, they make things like Idle Miner Tycoon and Factory Tycoon. They had a fantastic messaging strategy when they started using our A/B testing capabilities to really test things like cadence and messaging, as well as even using it to advertise new beta testing features to their consumers. They were able to actually improve their overall top line revenue by 15% and improve in-app purchases by almost 50%. Those are, I think, the kind of experiments that really can drive results for your businesses. And I think the next kind of frontier on engagement is really around being predictive. The most savvy companies out there today are not only starting to, look at what consumers are doing, but also using machine learning and lookalike models to understand like what are the consumers doing before they make that purchase or before they do things like churn. One of our customers, who I won't say a specific name, but they actually were using our predictive churn features at Braze to help identify groups of consumers who are likely to actually stop playing the game. And they were able to reduce churn, but just by offering people a targeted offer a couple of weeks before they're actually likely to exit the game. So there's a lot in customer engagement that brands have to be aware of and on top of today. It's a tough market.
Yeah. When I think about playing, I mean, the whole point is sort of, feeling like you're immersed in whatever you're playing. And if there's a part of the personalization that, you can't do, then it feels like that's one of the things that just knocks you out of the experience, right? And, all you need is that one excuse to stop playing a game. So personalization seems entirely relevant here.
I agree more.
Yeah. So how does the social component of gaming drive long-term value? Let's start with Will on this one.
Sure. I think social is a critical part of keeping gamers engaged. There's the community aspect, but also, I think the best brands out there are really also bringing in their friends into the experience, even in single player games, even in mobile games. advertising how your friends who are connected through your social networks are advancing in games, brings out the kind of competitive fire that people love to have keep progressing and keep moving forward. And it really helps them, I think, become more immersed in the game and more engaged. That's going to help you drive, not only engagement, eventually upsells and retention. Additionally, I think social is really crucial for re-engagement. I think a lot of companies are now at the point where they're starting to build out, standard re-engagement campaigns where they might have somebody, if they haven't played the game in a while, send them an app message the next time they log in with a personalized offer. If that doesn't work, send them a push notification. If that doesn't work, send them an email. But I think the next kind of piece of that is also bringing in things like social advertisement, because a lot of times consumers are going to, unsubscribe from push, or maybe they never actually subscribe in the first place. They might not, email might not be appropriate for your brand, depending on who you are. And if they don't open the app, your in-app messages aren't going to do much. So being able to target them on things like Facebook audiences and things like that, Twitter, it's crucial to be able to kind of bring people back in and remind them of what you can offer them, because there's just so much competing for the eyes of consumers today.
And Lisa, how does the social component of gaming drive long-term value for you?
Yeah, so there's really two places that players can engage with us in our games. One obviously is in the game itself. So we are working on building some social experiences in games. And one example of that is our Bingo Pop game. So in that game, there is a club system. And in the clubs, players are able to talk to other players. They're able to strategize about some of the club challenges. They're able to offer tips and tricks. We also see some players just talking about their life in general with other players in the game. And when we first launched the club system in Bingo Pop, we were experimenting with kind of canned responses. And then more recently, we were allowing players to chat more real time. And we definitely learned that the real chats were preferred. So it's something that we are going to continue to offer to our players. And we also learned that as far as retention goes, players who are chatting with other players, players who are actively engaged in those clubs, we find that their retention is higher than players who are not engaging with those features. And then Harry Potter is a little bit of a different situation. And again, it all goes back to understanding who you're making games for. So when we first started creating Harry Potter, we had a very specific audience in mind. So these players are all about immersion and being immersed in a fantasy world. So a lot of times we'll test social features and they don't test that well, because the game for them is a place for them to kind of live out, right, this fantasy. It's a personal world for them. We do have some percentage of players who do like engaging with other players, but they'll do this outside of the game itself. So a lot of our community, even though they don't like to engage socially in the game, they're taking a lot of our game content and generating their own content through the creation of fan art. There's a lot of game-inspired memes that are out there on some social channels. Even things such as quizzes that are coming from the games, and online bingo has even been created using our content. So I think it's really interesting that even though this game isn't meant to be a social experience, and players in this game really are looking for more of a single player, very immersive experience in this fantasy world, a percentage of players are engaging socially outside of the game. So both can work very well.
Yeah, it feels like this game is sort of a proxy for the fact that there aren't any more books coming out or any more movies being made. People are still engaged with Harry Potter and they want to talk about it. Right?
Yes, and the story for them is it's so important to long-term engagement. So making sure that it's a story they can't get anywhere else. Right? You can't get the story from the books, from the movie. So the game has done an extremely amazing job of making sure that the Harry Potter experience in the game is something that is engaging for them.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how do you use technology to build personalized experiences for gamers? Start with Will again on that.
Sure. I think, at Braze, we actually help build out customer engagement software, as I mentioned at the top. But I think what's really important, I think, if I was going to boil it down for gaming companies out there and building these personalized experiences, is not necessarily to try to do everything in-house. and not try to build everything yourselves. Because I think at the core, when people come in and work for a game developing company, they want to build video games. They want to build cool experiences. They want to be level creators. They want to build physics engines if they're doing, 3D games, all sorts of things. What they don't necessarily want to do is work on everything in terms of the engagement strategy they have, in terms of the messaging strategy and building out all the piping there. So I really encourage people to think about a mixed kind of outcome with gaming with regard to customer engagement. What I mean by that is thinking about using the best in class SaaS technology and customer engagement technology that there. Braze one of them, and there's also other options that you can look at there. And then thinking about how do you really deeply integrate a tool like that with your technology stack? How do you, if you have, let's say machine learning that kind of on your end that helps you analyze what customers are likely to want to purchase, or for in-app purchases, or for cosmetics in a game and things like that. Thinking about how you integrate that into your customer engagement strategies. That way, the messaging that you actually have that's coming through your marketing team and through your product team is really still leveraging those pieces of core technology that you have to make sure that that messaging is not, it doesn't feel generic. It doesn't feel, just one size fits all. It feels like it's something that's really catered to that individual and makes it feel like the game is a more welcoming place that really, speaks to them and really kind of knows what they want to see out of that kind of experience next. So building things like those real-time pipelines between, your systems and those SaaS platforms and the customer engagement technologies, I think leads to the most sophisticated and best outcomes overall.
And Lisa, how do you feel about using tech to build personalized experiences for gamers as well?
Yes, extremely important for long-term engagement. And at Jam City, we really consider ourselves an entertainment company rather than just a mobile gaming company. And one of our goals really is to try and maximize engagement and develop multi-year relationships with players. So our games are meant to continue to build upon the live service strategy and to continue to deliver ongoing content that is going to be a very highly personalized experience for players. So just like Netflix uses machine learning to optimize and personalize the consumer experience, like I'm sure my Netflix newsfeed looks very different from yours, Dean, and probably even from yours as well. So they do a really great job of taking that behavioral data and making sure that whatever it is they're showing to you is going to be something that you are going to enjoy. So similar to Netflix, we also use a lot of machine learning to optimize the journey for our players. It's so important for us to make sure that the content we're delivering is something that they are going to enjoy for years to come. And one of the things that we do at Jam City is to take kind of what we call this hybrid human tech approach. So we do a lot on the front end, just understanding the psychology behind why players play games. It's so important to understand kind of their core motivations. What is it? What are those experiences that are going to lead to long-term engagement? Why are they playing games? What's the psychology? What's the motivations? What are some of those unmet needs? So we'll take the human approach that will inform some of the machine learning algorithms, and those continue to be optimized over time. So we're continuing to deliver new experiences on an ongoing basis.
So as my aside here, I've been talking to people like Edward Sachi at Fable Studio about creating AI characters that they can use in either social experiences or games, and they're tapping into things like OpenAI's GPT-3 AI technology, and their hope is to create virtual characters in games, like non-player characters that you could talk to for hours at a time or so. So
fun.
Talk about using technology to make games more engaging. That's one of those things they can't really wait for, because usually in games, when you come across a character, you talk to them, they say a few lines and that's about it, right? And, so if you could sort of get stuck on a side quest just chatting with somebody for a long time, that would be amazing. But I don't know how far off that's going to be, but we'll see. But back to our main train here on growth and marketing. Like, what are your thoughts on acquisition versus retention in the gaming industry, Lisa?
So both are extremely important. Without long-term retention, just acquisition just becomes a leaky faucet, and it's very difficult to scale titles if you don't have high retention for the games. One exception to this rule are low CPI titles like hyper casual games, for example. So since both are very important, we do put a lot of thought into both acquisition and retention. Again, our goal really is to develop multi-year long relationships with players. So we spend a lot of time investing in live service strategy and really thinking about what are some new innovations we can bring to our content? What are some new events that we can create? Maybe what are some new characters we can bring into the game? And if we're not able to constantly innovate and bring in those new experiences, then it's possible that players could churn out of the game. One of the things we hear over and over is that when a game starts to feel repetitive, that's when they're more likely to go try something new, because they really are looking for ongoing new experiences. And then acquisition is also extremely important. It's become more difficult over time. It's very expensive to acquire new players. So we are constantly trying to figure out what messages can we use to really reach the right audience to bring new players into the game. Or going back to the Cookie Jam example, what are some partnerships that we could be thinking about that are new and innovative partnerships that is a good fit with the game itself, but has the potential to bring in new players that are going to continue to play this game for years to come.
So when in doubt, enlist Vanna White. Right?
Just make sure that, yes, it's a good fit with the current player base.
Yeah. Will, how about you? What are your thoughts on acquisition versus retention in games?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely a virtuous cycle. Right now, I think focusing on retention is more important now than ever. Something we've seen amongst our customers and our data is that retention on the whole during COVID, despite the actual rise in interest in gaming and I think the aggregate raise in amount of time people are spending playing video games across all platforms, retention's down just because I think people are always looking for something new. They're always looking to change up what's happening day to day, especially in video gaming, because it's one of the few things that does change if you're actually inside a lot more often than you normally are most years. So with that being said, I think focusing on your retention messaging or focusing on how you're, to Lisa's point, developing new features and getting new product out there for consumers to engage with is really critical, because the acquisition is getting more and more expensive over time. That's a trend that's been happening since well before COVID. Cost per acquisition has been going up year after year since I got into this business in the last 10 years. And I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon. So with all that being said, every kind of lost user that you churn is kind of a wasted dollar in terms of acquisition. So if you're not really thinking about focusing on retention now, especially when retention is on the whole down across the industry, there's never a better time to start than now. And it's honestly, it's crucial for every brand out there and every gaming company out there to think about how can I keep users. So,
so what sorts of growth marketing tactics do you use to grow your user base and attract a larger audience?
Yeah, so in terms of growing your user base and attracting a larger audience, I think there's a couple of things you can do. One of the things is a lot of publishers that we actually work with are also, in terms of the acquisition that they're trying to attract, or the new users they're trying to attract through acquisition, are not only actually trying to run ad buys like we just talked about, but also doing things like cross-promoting between different properties they have. So I think cross-promotion is a huge tactic that's going to keep going on into the future and become more and more important, especially as it becomes harder to market to people anonymously through the internet as more advertising kind of controls get taken away from us. So I think that's a really important thing for brands to think about. And additionally, I think the kind of, if you're talking about actually improving your audience within your own game for growth marketing, it's critical that you maintain that mentality of testing. We talked about this earlier, but if you're not constantly A/B testing both your product in terms of what you're offering to consumers in terms of the main game experience, but also your messaging, how you're talking to people, when you're talking to people, that's critical. We have one customer right now who really focused on geo-targeting during the pandemic. And what they found actually was that a lot of their ability to gain new players and attract new players to really fully commit to the game was based upon COVID recovery rates that they were seeing across the world. They were seeing that in markets that have had, lower impact from COVID and have had more of a recovery. Those players were also, it makes sense why, more likely to do things like purchase an app and more likely to actually engage with that content versus, customers who tended to hit the paywalls in markets that have had a more severe COVID impact, like the United States. There's a little bit more flightiness after they kind of hit those places where an in-app purchase would really actually push them over the edge. So those sorts of things and being mindful of where your audience is and really being personalized and testing that strategy consistently, all are going to help you grow your user base, retain more users, and ultimately attract a large audience.
And Lisa, yeah. What are your growth marketing tactics?
Yeah, so three really big things for us. One is team. So we have a fairly large UA team that consists of in-house media buyers, creative folks, and then creative strategy. And so that team is responsible for really driving the strategy and learnings across the portfolio. So it's great that we have a lot of games within our portfolio. So that helps us kind of amplify our learnings a lot faster. So for example, if we see something working well in Cookie Jam, our Genies and Gems audience is pretty similar. So we're able to replicate some of those learnings for that game as well. Second, which we touched upon earlier, is technology. We have spent a lot of resources and investment in some of our in-house buying tools. And then machine learning and automation is also extremely helpful for the UA process as well, which saves us greater time efficiency and greater buying efficiency at scale across different channels and different titles. And then third, this is so important, and Will, it just goes back to the point you made about testing and iterating. So we make several different creative. They're always testing different creative strategies for Facebook ads. And we also, our UA team has a very strong relationship with our consumer insights team. So we have a very large audience segmentation that we ran that is focused a lot on the psychology and motivations, again, around why are players so invested in these games, and it differs across different games. So our UA team is able to leverage that information to create the right message for the right audience. And once they have that information, again, it comes down to testing and iterating over and over and over. So those learnings have really helped us to drive greater efficiency. And we're going to continue to do a ton of testing, especially as UA becomes, our acquisition becomes more difficult.
If I can double click on one thing there, I just want to say I couldn't agree more with what you said about team and the importance of team and kind of those structures you're setting up between individuals in your organization, because I think that we see so much more growth between those companies that are doing things like connecting consumer insights teams directly to product and marketing teams and getting all these people into the same room to think holistically about these problems. Because oftentimes I think, there's times when marketing teams come across and say like, well, I love to engage my consumers this way, but that just seems impossible. But they haven't talked to the technology teams and the product teams about how they could accomplish that. And there are times when the product teams probably could really use the insights of the marketing team about how to talk to their consumers. So the more you can bring all these groups together, it helps so much.
100%. It's something that we've definitely focused on over the past few years, and making sure that there is a strong cross-functional partnership across multiple teams.
It's interesting you brought up so much about in-house teams here that it reminds me of some of the other companies out there that sort of provide some of this external capability, right? With user acquisition, companies like Tilting Point and Network, they're almost offloading a lot of the user acquisition costs for the smaller game companies, the small mobile game companies, the ones that are sort of aspiring to become the ones that are lifted up out of the vast soup of titles out there, or want to be the next acquisition target. It's interesting that the industry is sort of creating new kinds of companies here to sort of fill in and fill out the ecosystem. Lisa, on the next one, let's go to you. How do you work with influencers and community leaders within games?
Yeah, great question. So 2 examples here. Last year, we launched a creator program as a way to reward and empower some of our most passionate players. So the creators were able to share unique codes with their fan base. And in turn, the creators earned a commission on revenue that was generated by those users in game. So that is something that worked pretty well, and something that we will continue to explore this year. The second thing that is really exciting for us is more on the game development side of things. So as soon as a studio is starting to work on a new concept, we'll bring in what we call a super fan community along the way. So initially, the games just start off as kind of like a written concept that someone has. So we'll test that concept with what we call our super fans, and those are really meant to be the early adopters. And we will bring them along the journey. So it might take 1 year, it might take a year and a half, it might take longer, but as soon as we get a prototype, we'll do a lot of testing with those players. So for us, it's extremely important to bring in kind of those super fans or influencers, you might call them, as early on as possible, to make sure that we are creating something unique and different. The mobile marketplace is extremely crowded right now, so it's very difficult to be successful if you're not able to innovate. And again, just going back to live services and making sure that you're creating the right game experiences for the right audiences. The superfan community has really helped us to create some innovative experiences that we will have coming out in the near future.
And Willie, do you want to mention anything about influencers as well?
Yeah, the only thing I would say about influencers is just it's something that we've seen a number of our customers be successful with. And I think it's just about really understanding the spend you're going to use on getting some of these marquee influencers out there to really be influencing your product versus the return you're going to get. But there's certainly been, huge influencer marketing that's becoming more and more prevalent with games. I think of, not a customer of ours, but somebody I just admire in the communities. I see what Fortnite is doing, for example, out there with getting, major DJs to do in-game experiences and things like that. Like I think Marshmello, for example, did a huge concert in there. I'm sure a few more other did that I can't remember at the moment, but those sorts of in-game experiences and kind of blending the influencer marketing with actually what you're actually experiencing in the game. I think that's only going to happen more and more in the future. And it's going to be interesting to, I think, and something I'd be curious to understand how brands are doing is measuring the ROI on those things is got to be an interesting thing, because it's clearly got to be working for some of them. They keep doing it.
Yeah, I remember Among Us as well was, out a couple of years ago and nobody noticed. And then the influencers got a hold of it, and they just started having such hilarious sessions where they were playing the games together. And Among Us became one of the biggest hits of 2020. Right? So,
it's a great example.
Yeah. They got some free influencer marketing too, by people like AOC showing up on Twitch and playing for 500,000 people. And
that's right.
I'm sure she wasn't like getting paid, to my knowledge, by the Among Us dev team. So
so how can you still do effective targeted marketing in light of new privacy guidelines? Will, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I mean, I think privacy is getting to be a more and more complex landscape, as I'm sure you all know. It started a couple of years ago, the rollout of GDPR, and with new California Consumer Protection regulation coming out, the CCPA, it's only going to get harder. And it's the complexity of how you have to treat customers across geographies is getting harder and harder. But, at the end of the day, in some ways, I think it's simplifying things too. It's the customer relationship. It's all based on consent. And with new privacy guidelines, it's really about getting that affirmative consent, to be able to use things like push notifications, use things like email, and really telling customers, hey, this is the kind of relationship I want to have with you. These are the kind of communications I want to send you. Are you down for that? Is that something you're good with? Because we can provide value to you in these ways. And that's from gaming and beyond. Other brands have to adjust the exact same constraints. And I think what that's doing is actually in some ways creating more engaged audiences with the consumers, because they know what they're getting into. They know what they're signing up for when they have this kind of affirmative consent. Also, I think with, you see the guidelines changing now from Apple kind of getting rid of IDFA. And there's a recent article that just came out the other day in Ars Technica about how I saw them writing about how Google's considering doing similar things to the Google Ad ID. So, that kind of cross property targeting that you were previously be able to do with these advertising identifiers is kind of going away. And I think it just really reinforces the importance of first party kind of customer engagement strategies, really, focusing on your retention and focusing on things like, marketing to your consumers, through their in-game activity, and doing things like, asking if they're willing to log in. So that way, if you're a game developer with many, many different titles, you can start to associate that data, their behavior, and cross promote titles to them if they've opted into that, if they've logged into it. But we kind of can't do it behind the scenes anymore. So in some ways, I think it's clarifying things, but it's certainly going to cause some growing pains in the meantime.
Mm-hmm. And Lisa, your own view here?
Yeah, so agree 100% with everything Will said. One of the things that we've been doing on our end is really leveraging our insider communities again, just to learn as much as possible about them. So outside of games, what are some of their interests and hobbies? Where are some of their places we can reach them? And then we've also been doing a lot of work with the cross app tools in Appiani and Sensor Tower. So those tools have been helpful to understand, what other games are these players playing? What other media are they consuming? Where are they spending their time outside of games? So by creating a holistic profile of these players, our UA team and product marketing teams can take that information to create new acquisition strategies.
Mm-hmm. I think in this space, it is very interesting that you can get very different answers to questions when you ask people like, do you want to give the company your private information? You could ask it that way, or you could also ask, would you rather have spam or targeted advertising? Or you could also ask, would you rather get this for free, or would you like to be charged money for it? There's some very different answers you get to some of the sort of the same questions here. So, let's see. So how can you well, you touched on this some, I think. I'm not sure if you have more of an answer here, but how can you make better use of first party information about users?
I think it's really, you need to make sure that whatever kind of customer engagement tool you're using, that you really need to make sure that you have one place that, both technical and non-technical teams can leverage that personalized data to make sure you're getting the right message to the right customer at the right time. And that's doing things like optimizing and testing cadence. It's testing channel. If you have, two different platforms out there where you have, a push notification system and an email system that don't talk to each other, it's very, very difficult to effectively leverage your first party information to create a kind of cohesive customer engagement experience for consumers, because they don't experience email and push notifications differently. They experience it as one stream of content from the brand and from the gaming developing company. So if you're going ahead and, having those two systems not talk to each other, you're going to inevitably have things where you're over messaging on one channel, or you're probably using channels that your customers don't care about or don't want. And so if you're not bringing that all into a central place where you can really think deeply about, is this group of individuals somebody even responds to push notifications? Should I be sending them that push notification, or should I be, using what I know to better optimize my emails for them, or vice versa? I think you're kind of missing the boat on what's possible with first party information. And that's something where I think you're going to see those retention rates for brands go through the roof when you really start looking deeply at those questions.
So we're switch gears a bit here about some forward-thinking trends. Lisa, what's the role of mobile in the future of the gaming industry? Where do you think you'll find the most promising growth opportunities?
I definitely think that innovation is going to be extremely important. I think that we'll see a lot of genre hybridization coming in the future. So I think that Playrix did a really fantastic job of taking puzzle and mashing it up with story plus design. I think we're going to continue to see trends like that. I also think, just given the importance of acquisition and the rising cost of UA, the continuation of IP integrations is something that we will also continue to see. I think the lines will start to blur between different platforms as well. So everyone has their phones with them all of the time, right? So they're going to expect to be able to play cross-platform. So if they're out and about, they'll want to experience the game on mobile, and maybe when they're at home, when they have longer time to play games, they might want to play that same game on either PC or console. And I do think, especially after COVID, I do think just this need for human connection is going to continue to be important for games. So I think that, you know, friends are still going to want to play games with friends. So figuring out how to create those social experiences in games is going to continue to be a trend moving forward.
And Will, how about you?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Lisa said. I think a lot of the role of mobile in the gaming industry is going to start to really explode as you start to break down those walls between mobile and the other platforms. I mean, in many cases, you might have a fully featured mobile game that's rich and engrossing today that could also be, you know, a subset of what you're doing in a larger experience on desktop or on console, and being able to play the main game on desktop, but still playing that engrossing mobile experience on your phone or at home, or doing second screen experiences. All these sorts of things are going to start to become more prevalent. And so that way you can kind of give more to the consumer and give them more engagement opportunities. So I think that's a huge part of where we're going, is that kind of second screen experience. And kind of there's also more out there with things like augmented reality in gaming that's only starting to become prevalent with things. You know, you saw the Pokemon Go trend and things like that. There's going to be more opportunities like that for really novel experiences through mobile that are going to come up in the years to come.
And we're getting close to the end here, but here's one of our beefier questions. If you launched a game tomorrow, what are the channels you need to be on? What are the success metrics and long-term metrics that matter? Is there a point where they are locked in and never leaving the game? Or are you worried about churn constantly? Let's go to Will.
Sure. I think you always have to be worried about churn. There's always a new game coming out. There's always something out there that's going to drive attention away from your platform and onto something else. And so you have to constantly be competitive. I think we've learned that from all the customers we work with and seen it time and time again. In terms of the channels you need to be on to, get rid of that churn, I think you really need to be thinking about how you're leveraging things like push notifications to re-engage users, but doing so tactfully and only using those sorts of kind of more intrusive channels like push notifications and emails and SMS communications. And I know a few game developers use that as well. You need to be using those as sparingly as possible to respect the consumer, and leveraging, things like in-app communications, in-browser communications when you can, because if you're not kind of having that respectful engagement with the consumer, some other brand will, and that consumer is going to go to where they feel like they're being best engaged and most respectfully engaged without it being rubbed in their face. So I think those sorts of channels are key, but you have to use them in the right mix and you have to blend them the right way. I also think that, only other thing I would say is, being constantly focused on things like 7-day retention or 14-day retention are key. But I think it's also important for developers out there to really let experiments run beyond that. We had one customer years back now that I will never forget. They really ran an experiment with us where they completely re-optimized their onboarding campaign for their users in this game. And they looked at the slope of the graph, and it was very interesting because they saw, after 5 days, this new onboarding experience that they were messaging out about actually reduced customer retention after 5 days. So they turned it all off. But when they actually looked 30 days later at the same cohort of users that actually had received that kind of new onboarding experience, the D30 retention was actually higher than users in their control. So it was just that what they had caused was some more users had fallen off at the beginning of the funnel, but they actually kept more users in the long term. So, I think it's important to look at the kind of short-term retention metrics because, gamers are fickle and they can move quickly, but you can't lose track of the long-term effects of what you're doing either.
And Lisa, how about you? How do you feel about the channels, the metrics, and churn here?
Yeah, so as far as the channels go, I think it's just, again, it goes back to understanding who your audience is and where you can reach them. So for us, and Harry Potter is a good example, when that game first launched, we started optimizing a lot of our social content on Facebook. But we've noticed that given the younger demographic of that player base, a lot of those players are actually on Instagram. So we've been leveraging Instagram more for our Harry Potter audience. For other games, we have learned that YouTube is kind of where we can reach these players. So we have been, for some of our titles, investing in a YouTube channel, which has been very successful. So those players in particular like seeing content in more video type of format. So we're able to engage with them through videos, and we're able to share tips and tricks with them. We're able to preview new content. So YouTube for that audience is where we can reach them. Doesn't work so well for a game like Cookie Jam. Most of those players are on Facebook. So we're continuing to optimize our Facebook content for games like Cookie Jam. And then agree with Will 100% on churn. We're constantly worried about churn as well. And that's part of why research is actually pretty critical for live services. Coming up with new and innovative experiences, really identifying reasons why players left the game. So we have a pretty big churn initiative that we just started recently, where we will reach out to players who, maybe they've been playing our game for 3 years, 4 years or more and stopped playing recently. We're able to contact them, especially through our insider community, and we'll have conversations with them to learn what happened, why did you leave the game? And by identifying those key frustrations, we're able to continue to optimize that experience to ensure that they're able to come back to the game. And then we'll also do a lot as far as retargeting campaigns go. So once we're able to identify what some of those key frustrations are, when we're able to create new content that alleviates those reasons for churn, we're able to retarget players to bring them back into the game.
And let's see, our wrap up maybe for Will here. Immersive technology is set to be the next big thing everyone is excited about. How will it shape the user experience and engagement in the future? And when do you expect this to happen on a broad level?
I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, obviously, I think, as I said earlier, things like augmented reality are going to become bigger in terms of mobile. You're seeing that across not only gaming, but even other things like retail experiences. I think the big question mark, too, is around when VR is also going to be the next kind of frontier for gaming. It's starting to happen now. The sets are pretty expensive, and you're starting to see things like Apple coming out and saying that they're developing. Well, they haven't said it yet, but a lot of people are saying that Apple is developing their own VR headset and working on that right now. And I think the thing is that none of these technologies is necessarily going to be the predominant way that you experience games. There's still going to be consoles out there. There's still going to be mobile phones out there. I think what's going to change is how brands and companies and game developers are going to be forced to really think thoughtfully about how they intermix all these experiences and make sure that they're understanding still the core customer who's engaging on all these different channels and platforms, and really not viewing them as different individuals across each of those platform experiences. I think it's going to take time for them to get there. It's a difficult question. It's a difficult engineering problem, and it's a difficult people problem as well. So I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but it's probably coming sooner than we think.
Yeah, well, I think Superdata said that 58% of the revenues in the game industry are now from the mobile business. And so I don't think you guys have anything to worry about for a little while. So anyway, great. Well, thank you very much, Will and Lisa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Lisa. It's great talking to you both.
Thanks, Dean.
Okay. Have fun.